Hi guys, what's up? This is Ramattra. If you guys don't know me, I've been a top 500 player in Overwatch 1 for 6 years, now playing Overwatch 2, and I got the chance to play Ramattra early. I looked through other videos and there's not really any good tutorials out. I spent like the last 2 weeks hard grinding the hero, trying to get everything down and really trying to understand the hero in depth, and I think I have a pretty good idea of how the hero works. I think he has a lot of strengths that not a lot of people have talked about yet. So today I thought I will give you an in-depth guide on him, go over everything you need to know how to climb on the hero. He's super fun, honestly. Probably one of the most fast-paced and aim-intensive tanks in the game. Enough talk, and let's go. Okay, so we'll go over the basics first and then go more in depth about his playstyle, how to play him, and tips and tricks. This is gonna be pretty information heavy, so feel free to slow it down. If I talk too fast, let me know. Anyways, let's go over the basics. Ramattra is what Blizzard are calling a new tempo tank.
Tempo tank.
Which, to be fair, he does play very differently than every other tank we had in the roster so far. He has an Omnic and a Nemesis form, and he can use both and swap them equally to be useful. His Omnic form has a primary fire that is probably the hardest ability to learn in his entire kit. It looks really easy on paper, it's really hard. It's a very slow firing projectile that can also headshot. What this means in practice is, when you're very far away, it's going to be very hard for you to get full value out of it, since the travel time is really high. But if you hit the ability, it deals a ton of damage. It's actually really insane. It is absolutely essential that you lead your shots and predict where the enemy is going to be instead of just tracking. In this example right here, you will miss most of your bullets. The ability you can probably compare best to something like Sojourn's primary fire, but again, it's way harder to hit and it's way slower. Spending time practicing this in specific is gonna really make or break you as a Ramattra player. It's a really big impact, and it's gonna impact your overall performance on the hero quite drastically. The shield he has in Omnic form, the right click, can be summoned anywhere on the ground in a really big radius. It has 1000 HP, but the catch is it only lasts for 4 seconds. So it really does not matter that it's 1000 HP overall, because most of the time it will not break by the time it disappears. Think of it more like an invincible shield to push or to fall back on, rather than something like a Sigma shield. It's very different, even though in the trailer it looked very similar to the Sigma shield. With a cooldown that lasts for 13 seconds, the uptime is going to be very low overall, especially if you consider you will also spend a lot of your time in the other form, the Nemesis form, so it's not going to be up for a long time, which means he's really not a shield tank. You shouldn't look at him like a shield tank. Hey, short update on this. There was an update just now that patched Ramattra and buffed him quite a lot. He now has 675 HP in Nemesis, and his movement speed going increased in Nemesis. Point is, there will always be updates and patches, buffs and nerfs, but he's always going to play the same. Anyways, back to the video. His shift will transform you into his Nemesis form, which is going to add 150 HP in armor, so he's going to be going up to a max of 650 HP in total. And the primary fire in this form is him swinging his fists. This is very low range, right? It's almost melee range. It's just a bit below 10 meters on paper, which sounds like a lot, but if you look at it in game, it's like almost melee range, right? And that's probably the biggest weakness of him. He is very limited in his range when he is in his Nemesis form. It does go through shields and it does deal a good 60 damage per punch. You really want to be close to the enemy if you pop Nemesis form. If you pop it further away, they're just going to kite you and you're not going to get a lot of value, but we'll go more into that later. Aiming in this form is very forgiving, like the hitbox is really big, and there's also no headshot multiplier, so you don't have to worry about headshots. It's just very brute force, basic damage. In his Nemesis form, he also has a block that reduces the incoming frontal damage significantly, but I almost forgot it existed for this guide, honestly, because it's not that great. It doesn't give you any benefits, right? Doomfist, when you block, you get the charged fist up. Unlike Doomfist's block, Ramattra does not overcharge anything. It still slows you down, so it will give the enemies an easier time to move away from you. So you only really want to use it when you really need to, and I'll go over that later again. His Ravenous Vortex is the only ability you can use in both of his forms, Nemesis and Omnic. It travels in a very slow arc, not nearly as high as something like Ananade, so it will take a bit of time to get used to. But it has a really big AoE, and you can usually, after practicing, hit your desired target. So once it touches the ground, it does a tiny bit of damage, but it slows the enemy within quite significantly. But it has to deploy on the ground, like it will not trigger if you hit an enemy. So think of this mainly as an ability that can stop enemies from running away or running towards you, not a damage dealing ability. His ult we'll get into in a bit. There's a lot of things to say about it, and it really dictates how you play the hero. It's the strongest part of his kit overall. Alright, let's get into his movement and positioning. The movement on Ramattra is actually the main key to making him work. The main damage you're gonna deal is gonna be close range, and that goes for both his Nemesis form, but also his Omnic form. So closing the distance to the enemy is really, really important. It's the key to making him work. It is really important also how you set up your position to where your Nemesis form can deal maximum damage. Start out fights by using your shield offensively, so you can move in. If you're defending, hold close angles rather than starting further back. This is in direct contrast to something like Sigma. You don't use the shield and poke safely, because once your shield runs out, you will have nothing to protect yourself and your team. And you will also not be able to use your Nemesis form if you're not close to them, right? We're not going to be able to do any damage. After you close the distance by using the shield, you can still put up a lot of damage into the enemy in your Omnic form. But once you're close enough, you want to go into your Nemesis form and go ham. It is super important to keep on pressing W to stay as close as possible. Almost no hero in the game will be able to stand his ground against you in your Nemesis form. And they will have to either back off or die. That's their choice. Ramattra's biggest weakness is his lack of mobility. If you look at other heroes, almost every hero on the roster has something to relocate. D.Va speed boost, Reinhardt's charge. The only other hero that has no movement abilities, or the only other tank that has no movement abilities, is Roadhog. So Ramattra's biggest weakness is really that he lacks any mobility. So it is really essential you keep on pressing forward and you keep on thinking about your position at all times, because you can't get out or in very fast. Remember that the Vortex ability can stop enemies from retreating, so you want to throw it behind them, not on them, right? It's not a damage ability again. You want to throw it behind them to stop their retreat, or if you're in danger, you throw it in front of you so you can retreat. Make them decide between fighting you or taking a punishing slow, and use it as like an area denial tool. If you have to back out because Nemesis is running low, you can also use it to protect your own retreat. If we're talking about the block again, only use it if you really must. You want to get the maximum amount of damage out of your Nemesis form. It has a cooldown, right? Once your Nemesis form runs out, you will transform back automatically into your Omnic form, but you will most likely have a shield backup because the cooldown goes down during Nemesis, right? So it keeps on ticking down. You will also start with full ammo every time, so you don't have to worry about reloading. Keep an eye out on when your Nemesis form will run out and decide ahead of time if you want to use the last 2 seconds to retreat, or if you want to stay close and hard commit to end the fight. This will really depend on how much HP you have, but also factors like how is your team doing and how is the enemy's team doing. This is a thing that will really come over time with a lot of practice. Overall, the main thing you will have to learn in the long run is when and where. When is a good time to move in and go into Nemesis? Where do you want to start the fight? I know this sounds really simple, but any slight miscalculation on your part and you will be the guy on the team that they tell you to report for feeding. And this will really come with time. The more time you spend on the hero, the better you will learn your own limits. I'm sure you have seen me by now in the background gameplay just poke a bit from longer range or back out. It's okay sometimes to stay in Omnic form for a bit longer. Don't feel like you have to use Nemesis every time it gets off cooldown, right? There is no reason to use it if you can't use it properly. And your patience overall will be massively rewarded once you get your ult. Ramattra's ult is called Annihilation, and it is the best ability by far in his kit. It is insanely powerful, and it can also counter a lot of other ults and playstyles of the enemy team. It will immediately transform you into Nemesis, and it will create a really big AoE that will constantly damage within the AoE. It only lasts for 3 seconds, but the timer will not go down if there's at least one enemy in its range. It doesn't matter how many enemies, as long as there's one enemy in it, you can keep it up. Now, if you look at a teamfight around a card where the enemy has to contest you, or you capture the point, they have to stay inside your Nemesis form, which means they will die if the fight goes on for long enough. Here you can see me use it in a fight where the enemy is stacking both Beat and Kiriko ult. So all I have to do here is stay alive. And the longer the fight goes, the more likely I am to win. This is an insane area denial tool. The enemy literally cannot win unless they burst you down really fast or they back out, in which case you get space. This is also the one time where the block ability of Nemesis comes in really useful, because now you're not the person that has to deal damage, you're the person that has to stay alive, right? As long as you stay alive, you win. So you will deal constant damage and your ult will not stop until the fight is over. In situations where the enemy can fall back, obviously try to stay inside their range. If you get speed boosted by Lucio, that's gonna help you out a ton, but keep on pressing W and adjust to the situation at hand. The longer the fight, the more likely you are to win. If you're not being focused, keep on running in and dealing damage, and if you realize they're trying to burst you down, stay alive with your block. Just block non-stop. It really doesn't matter as long as they focus you. As long as you and your team stays alive, you will win in the long run, every single time. Okay, now that you have the playstyle down, hopefully, let's go with some combos and tips. Don't be afraid to wait a bit longer to go into Nemesis form. Again, I mentioned this earlier. Even if you're close range, the Omnic form's primary fire still deals massive damage, especially if you learn to aim perfectly. You don't have to go into Nemesis form right away. On the same page, you can press Nemesis form again to quickly transform back. This is really useful if the enemy kited you and you realize, oh, I'm outside of range, and if you stay in Nemesis form, you're just not going to provide any value. And then put your shield up again or deal damage again. Don't think of Nemesis form as the better form. It is an alternative form that is usually better close range. But if you need a shield or you need a burst of long range damage, it's totally fine to swap back fast, right? Even after like 3 seconds. If you have the full 100 ammo ready in his Omnic form, it's also really good sometimes to just use it up all and then only after swap into Nemesis form. Remember, once you transform back into the Omnic form after your Nemesis runs out, you will be back to full ammo anyway. So it really doesn't matter, it can really maximize your damage output. Now the next step, a really important one actually, don't put your shield right in front of you. I know this seems kinda intuitive, right? On other tanks you do it, on Rhine you hold it close to you, and a lot of tanks learned this playstyle to where you put your shield right in front of you, but that's not how you want to use Ramatra's shield. Remember, once the shield is placed, you will not be able to relocate it in any way, right? And it's gonna disappear and it's gonna have a very long cooldown. So placing it pretty far ahead will allow you to move in while being under its protection. Whereas if you place it right in front of you, you cannot really move ahead, right? Because if you move a meter or two, you will die, or they will start shooting you and your shield is basically useless. Only use it close if you're in danger, right? If you want to stay alive in those situations, or if you're the one getting pushed. Swapping to Nemesis form will not heal you. It will only add an additional 150 armor. So if you panic Nemesis, it's not always the correct play. If you have a shield off cooldown, staying in the small form and taking cover behind your shield could be way better than swapping to Nemesis. You have a way bigger hitbox and it's very risky because you can get insta-bursted down. It is way easier for your enemy to hit the Nemesis form than your small form, especially if you have a shield to dance around. You will also not keep the HP you received in Nemesis form once you transform back into Omnic. It will always take away 150 armor. This will not affect your HP, only your armor. So if you're below 150, you will just end up with what you had before the Nemesis form, but you will not regen after transforming back. Bigger is not always better. Good one, streamer. If you end up in Nemesis form fighting a 200 HP target, every punch deals 60 damage, so you can easily finish off the kill faster by using a quick melee after 3 punches. This is like an animation cancel you can use once, but it only works once. So you can't do big punch, small punch, big punch, small punch, but you can do big punch, big punch, big punch, and then one small punch to finish them off faster. The Ravenous Vortex ability can pull people towards the ground. The reason I haven't mentioned this so far is because in practice, or in my gameplay at least, it will be very hard to even hit a Pharah or a Mercy in the sky, and it's very risky to use. If you miss, it's basically a misused Vortex, right? You should really treat it more like an area denial slow, and only really use it against flyers when you're absolutely sure you can hit them. I do have to mention though, it can cancel other movement based abilities, like if a Junkrat is about to jump out with his mine or a Widow is about to grapple, so you can cancel that. If you catch them, it's gonna pull them down and it's gonna pull them back into you. But that's a pretty high skill ceiling ability that you really will need to practice a bit with. Another tip is try to avoid fighting low ground to high ground. I mean, that goes for like almost every hero, but with Ramattra in specific, remember that you are weaker the further you are away, right? So if the enemy is on the high ground, you really want to try to take the high ground from them and pressure them instead of trying to shoot your little gun in your Omnic form. You will not really, in most situations, unless they stand still, you will not really get a lot of value. Your Nemesis form also won't be able to reach them in most cases. If they are high ground and you're low ground, you probably won't be able to punch them at all. Try to take the space from the enemy instead of trying to play long range. Ramattra overall is a close range hero. Against tanks like Reinhardt and D.Va, you can save your shield when you think they have Shatter or D.Va Bomb ready. I know that works for every shield in the game, but remember on other tanks you almost always have a shield ready, whereas on Ramattra you really have to think about it because he only has one shield like every 15 seconds. So consciously making the decision to save the shield for a Shatter or a D.Va Bomb could be the right play, which again comes over time. And I know I mentioned this earlier, but I'll say it again, Lucio will make Ramattra like twice as good. Like, it's insane. The lack of mobility is his weakest part, and having someone who can taxi you around, who can speed you into the enemy, is gonna make your job so much easier. And I'm sure the Lucios on the ladder are gonna enjoy playing with Ramattra, and you as a Ramattra player, you will also really enjoy playing with the Lucio. Feel free to ask, maybe, you know, there's definitely Lucio players out there. Speed into them, Nemesis, and watch them panic. So in summary, I know this was a lot of information condensed in a very short time span, but the key things, let me go over them again. Good aiming with the primary fire and Omnic form can add the damage that can net you kills. Right now or later when you transform to Omnic form. Really try to practice the projectile primary fire. Close the distance, learn how to use Ravenous Vortex as an AoE denial tool, and learn to recognize when a good time to engage is. Position aggressively, do not play like a passive shield tank like Sigma. You are more of a rush tank, I know they call it
tempo tank.
You're more of a rush tank than a poke tank, and without your ult you will have to play aggressive to get good value. Saving the ultimate for key fights where the enemy has to contest you is key to winning games. It is one of the best ults in the game, and in those situations it is probably the best ult in the game. So try to save your ult for when you know the enemy has to capture the point. Or when you know, oh, in this fight the enemy has to contest me or I will capture the point. If you use it in any other situation, it's kind of a waste. Remember, on most maps, look at an escort map, you will get into like 3 situations per round where the enemy will have to contest you. If you're about to capture first, second or third. So if you have your ult ready for those fights, you will win those fights if you play well. And that's the most important part about using his ult. And that's also the strongest part about the hero overall. And that was it for now. If you have any questions or you think I missed something, let me know in the comments and I'll try to answer all of them. There will be lots more Ramattra content coming. I will be uploading an Unranked to GM that I will do on day 1 when Ramattra drops into comp. That's gonna be live on my stream, twitch.tv/metro. Watch out for the Unranked to GM. And until next time, see you guys. Bye bye.